Home ownership is a critical component of the American dream for most people, which is a symbol of success, prosperity, and security. But beneath the pursuit of home ownership lies a stark reality. Not everyone has equal access to home ownership. Today, I will uncover the truth about racial disparities in mortgage lending and what it means for the African American community. Our journey begins with startling allegations made against a major player in the banking industry, the Navy Federal Credit Union. Accusations of racial bias in their mortgage lending practices have surfaced. These accusations raise critical questions about fairness and the systemic racism Black Americans face, but white and Black conservatives deny. And these specific allegations unfortunately concern our nation's service people, veterans, and their spouses. After the allegations surfaced, civil rights attorney Ben Crump filed a federal class action lawsuit. His complaint demonstrates a pattern of inequities. For instance, in 2022, Crump's complaint alleges Navy Federal approved 48% of Black applicants, but 75% of white applicants. And these applicants had comparable financial profiles. In some cases, the Black applicants had 3 times the income of their white counterparts. For instance, meet Bob. Bob is a Dallas area businessman. Despite having a solid credit score and a stable 6-figure income, Navy Federal denied his loan application. Here's Bob in his own words.
It's a nice neighborhood, you know.
Bob Atandi, a Kenyan immigrant turned Texas entrepreneur, knew this was his dream home the moment he saw it. It's in a highly sought-after school district that his son so desperately wanted to attend for its basketball program.
So how many homes did you look at before you found this one and said this was it?
We had about 6, but this was the one that we all wanted, and we were all praying to get this one.
Otandi's first choice for his mortgage was Navy Federal Credit Union. It services military members, defense personnel, veterans, and their families, and is the largest credit union in the country.
I was the CEO of my company, so I had a pretty good income.
Your credit was in the 700s. You'd recently sold your house. You had $100,000 for the down payment, which was more than 20%.
Correct. I mean, what more could you ask for?
CNN reviewed Otandi's financial documents. He even had a pre-approval letter from Navy Federal in hand. But just 2 weeks before closing,
I got a denial. They sent me a letter saying, "We're sorry, but your application has been denied."
Were you stunned, surprised?
I mean, I was stunned. I was shocked. I was hurt.
the denial letter listed excessive obligations in relation to income as the reason.
When they denied is when we came back and said, oh man, there's something else going on.
And what did you think that something else was?
Discrimination.
But it wasn't just Atandi. Thousands of other black applicants were also rejected. According to a CNN analysis of federal consumer protection data, last year, Navy Federal Credit Union only approved 48%. That's less than half of its black applicants for conventional home mortgages. White borrowers were approved more than 75% of the time. It's the biggest gap among the top 50 lenders. The data also shows Navy Federal was more than twice as likely to deny black mortgage applicants than white ones, even when different variables, including income, debt, property value, and down payment percentage, were the same.
I feel validated at one point, but also I feel a bit of anger because it shouldn't be happening.
2 weeks after Navy Federal rejected him, another bank approved Atandi for a mortgage. Navy Federal Credit Union denied CNN's request for an on-camera interview. In a statement, it said it is committed to equal and equitable lending practices and that CNN's recent analysis does not account for major criteria required by any financial institution to approve a mortgage loan. That includes credit scores, which are not public. Navy Federal declined to provide additional data. We asked Navy Federal why Bob Otandi's loan was denied, but they declined to comment, citing member privacy. CNN's analysis does not prove discrimination, but it does show dramatic racial disparities in who Navy Federal rejects and approves for conventional mortgage loans.
The black-white homeownership gap and the Latino-white homeownership gap today are both wider than they were in 1968 when we passed the Federal Fair Housing Act.
Lisa Rice has spent decades as a fair housing advocate. She says the disparities in Navy Federal's lending data are alarming and an extreme example of a bigger problem.
It's definitely a larger systemic issue. And we know that we have a long history of redlining and a long history of lending discrimination in this nation. Well, all of that data that is sort of tainted with bias is being used to develop the credit scoring systems.
We got the house, thank God, and we moved on. But what about the ones who are denied? What about the ones who now can't get their own dream house? It's something that's going to affect the generation all the way down to their kids.
The roots of this disparity do not exist in a vacuum. It stretches deep into our nation's history. It began with the brutal system of chattel slavery, when the law defined Africans as property. And since the law relegated these Africans to the status of property, they obviously had no rights to own property. This system of slavery lasted for 246 years and ending only after the Civil War. The ratification of the 13th Amendment freed African Americans from physical bondage, but left them destitute and penniless. The Africans possessed no resources to build wealth. White and black abolitionists fought to give them 40 acres to have a chance to build wealth. But as we know, the nation reneged on that promise. Additionally, another government program called the Homestead Act granted vast amounts of land to white settlers while excluding blacks from that program. The nation told blacks to lift themselves up by their bootstraps. But what bootstraps? What boots? These freedmen didn't have boots, straps, or anything else. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. articulated the cruelty of this empty advice in the following video.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
The other thing is that America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land, or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. and yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Dr. King's words resonate still today as we witness the legacy of systemic racism in the mortgage industry. But despite the broken promises and racial barriers that the freedmen experienced, African Americans, through hard work, grit, and determination, acquired valuable farmland, primarily on the East Coast. These tracts of land were the same tracts that blacks once toiled as enslaved people. Estimates suggest that blacks obtained about 1 million acres of farmland by the early 20th century. Land along the southern East Coast was cheap and plentiful after the Civil War. Whites were busy pursuing the Industrial Revolution, including building the rail system. However, whites eventually turned their attention back to the economic possibilities of coastal property. And through violence, terror, and discriminatory laws, with the assistance and collaboration of the federal government, whites began taking black farmland. Mobs of angry and murderous whites also destroyed prosperous black communities like Tulsa, Rosewood, Colfax, Louisiana, Wilmington, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Elaine, Arkansas, and many others. In recent history, black prosperity has been thwarted by redlining, restrictive covenants, gentrification, etc. These discriminatory housing practices have had a profound impact on black wealth. Meet Grandma Josephine Baker. She embodies the struggle African Americans have experienced to achieve full equality and to keep and guard our well-earned piece of the American dream. Also, here's a report on redlining. Not overlook gentrification and its impact on black home ownership. It works this way. First, systemic racism in the housing industry keeps property values low in predominantly black neighborhoods. Then whites move in, taking advantage of the cheap prices. And then the property values and taxes skyrocket, resulting in blacks being pushed and kept out of neighborhoods that they've lived in for decades. Let's break it down further. Wealth isn't just what you earn. It is what you own minus what you owe. It is a simple equation with profound implications. For black families, a negative net worth isn't just a number, it is a barrier to upward mobility. Now let's zoom out. We see the racial wealth gap in stark reality. The average white family has a median net worth of $285,000, whereas the average black family has a median net worth of only $44,000. The average Asian American family holds a median net worth of $536,000, and home ownership comprises a sizable part of most Americans' net worth. The disproportionate wealth of whites and Asians has enabled them to send their children to college, create businesses, invest in the market, and so forth without debt. Conversely, black families must borrow for college, business ownership, and so on. Diversity in investments is crucial. For many black families, their home is their primary asset. This concentration of wealth in real estate makes them vulnerable, especially when the market falters. Many white and Asian families, as we said above, have greater net worth than the average black family, and their wealth is diversified into stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc. So when banks systemically deny black families mortgages, it doesn't just affect one household. It ripples through black neighborhoods, stifling wealth creation and building and reinforcing cycles of concentrated poverty. Hence, mortgage loan discrimination is the evolution or mutation of white supremacy, black bondage, and Jim Crow. It accomplishes the same result, which is black subjugation, minus the angry white mobs and the race massacres of the past. Take a drive with me through this plush white neighborhood in North Dallas. You see well-kept homes with plush lawns. Now, ride with me through South Dallas. The picture changes significantly. There are fewer trees, more neglected and unkempt properties, homelessness, mental illness, crime, and etc. Even if we ride through a predominantly black suburb, we see black faces, but most of the properties are rentals or highly leveraged. These contrasts don't happen by chance. They don't happen in a vacuum. They are often the result of decades of unequal lending practices. Our history is a testament to the resilience in the fight for civil rights. But economic equality is the next frontier. The civil rights movement of the past paved the way, and now we must face a new battle, the right to financial freedom and equality. As we stand on the shoulders of giants, we look toward a future where the American dream is accessible to all. This expectation is not just about correcting wrongs. It's about creating a foundation for prosperity that spans all races and communities. It's time to ask ourselves, what can we do? It starts with awareness, education, and demanding accountability from our financial institutions. Hopefully Ben Crump's lawsuit can get the ball rolling. Please join the conversation, advocate for policy changes, and support organizations fighting for financial freedom and equality. Change is possible, but it begins with us. Thank you for joining me on this journey. We can build a fairer, more just society, one home at a time. I am Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching.